All right, I'm going to call this work session to order on February 4th, 2021. Can I have action on the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Wes. All those in favor say aye.
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 Great. We'll go into the COVID data update then.
All righty then, let me share my screen. Chris, it says you've disabled participant sharing. Can you open that for me? Or if you're able to share your screen, you could just open it. Here we go. All right, so I will preface my remarks to just say that rates in the county are still higher than we would want, although the numbers look better this week than they did last, and that has been a trend that we've been seeing since about January 8th. I do want to preface that because as rates look better in the county, I think that folks have a tendency to think things are better and want to relax, and we're not in that place yet. I did send out a staff email today, just encouraging folks with Super Bowl coming on Sunday to be very mindful of the fact that we still need to be safe at home, and we're going to replicate a similar message to the wider school community because we understand that our ability to be in school in person is largely dependent on human behavior. When we look at the case rates for the state and the county, they are down this week. Again, the transmission rate is also down. Again, we want that number to be below 1. It says unavailable for the state of Missouri because the source that we typically use for that data was unavailable, although I did find this 1.05 number in another data source. When we look at the new case rates, they are down in every category, and you'll see that that 14-day case rate is approaching that 200 threshold, which is the threshold that we need to cross to get out of the highest rate. So we're getting closer. The trends, I put this slide presentation together on Tuesday. The trends as of this morning were continuing to decline. So I'm hopeful that if things continue in this trajectory, we're going to be able to cross that threshold. Positivity rate is also much lower. The level of testing remains high, but the number of positive cases continues to decline, which is a good sign. Our zip code data is lower than it was in the zip codes for this week, although you still see that there are at least 20 cases in each of those areas. When we look at our risk level in schools, this is the Harvard 7-day rate. You'll see for St. Louis County that the lowest risk level is for our 0 to 4-year-olds. But these rates in terms of current risk for student age groups have also continued to decline week to week. So we're seeing a similar trend among our student populations. When we look at our positive student cases, our total since March is 69 cases. We did have at least one case in the 15 to 19-year-old age range within the last 14 days. When we look at current positive cases, we are aware of 3 current staff cases and 3 current student cases. And we've done contact tracing throughout. And that contact tracing resulted in some quarantine. Some of these quarantines are not related to contact tracing. The largest number of student contact tracing came from a single incident that we contact traced over the weekend. We did put 2 classrooms, the entire classrooms, into quarantine because that's part of safety protocol. To our knowledge, we did not have any residual transmission. We'll continue to stay in contact with those folks, but we promised that we would issue the most restrictive contact tracing and quarantine protocol as part of our safety protocol. So that is in fact what we did. And we will do that each and every time because we don't want to have on-campus transmission. And so while that number is large, I do want to continue to point out to the board that is a deliberate part of our safety protocols to make sure that anyone that could have been exposed is excluded, to make sure that we don't have residual spread. So that's what's going on with that. And I'd be happy to take any questions if you have them related to that report, or I can keep going and talk about reentry, either way.
Roxanne, I have a quick question.
Of course.
When we have, let's say, siblings across buildings, and we have one sibling in a building whose classroom has to go into quarantine, does the sibling in the other building also go into quarantine?
Not right out the gate, because that would be a contact of a contact. So we're putting a sibling in quarantine because they may possibly have had a contact that could result in a positive case, but contact tracing protocols don't then require you to put into quarantine someone who had contact with someone who had contact. Now, if the person in quarantine develops symptoms, then we would immediately ask that every member of that household stay at home. And I'll let Vince talk about that, but when they called and talked to families, they talked about how that would work. So the answer is no. You don't have to go in quarantine if you're a contact of a contact. You're only quarantined if you are potentially a direct contact.
Okay. And then have you seen any new guidance coming from the CDC with our administration change?
Currently, there have been a few changes at the CDC, but they have not impacted our practice. Again, our county has a very restrictive protocols, and so it really hasn't affected anything we're currently doing. They continue to signal that they believe, based on some studies that the CDC has done, that there may be some changes in guidance for schools coming at a future time, but we haven't seen that yet.
Okay, thank you.
I have one other question for the board. I could add a slide to this presentation if you're interested, in terms of vaccine. Currently, I get a report weekly about the percentage of vaccine that has been administered, or which percentage of the population has received vaccine, which currently in St. Louis County is just a little above 5%. So if that's something you're interested in, we could add that slide or not, but it is information that's available to us that we're watching.
I would be interested.
Okay.
I would be interested too. Is there a way that we can learn when our teachers are receiving the vaccine?
Yes, and I can address that briefly. So we have had some staff members who have already received their second dose, actually, because they are in tier 2, 1B, which is basically anybody that is a nurse or helps with our nursing. And then the tier 2, 1B is anybody that's over the age of 65 or had qualifying health conditions. So we have encouraged every staff member that wants a vaccine to sign up in all available venues. And anybody that's watching this, encourage you to do the same thing. And we sent out to all staff members about 7 different places that we're currently taking appointments for vaccines, because what will happen is they're going to work through that vaccine at the rate that they get vaccine. And in any day or week where they have more like people don't show up for appointments, they're going to be going down that list fairly rapidly so that no vaccine is wasted. And so when I continue to meet with the health departments, they're encouraging folks to sign up in every place that they possibly can and then take the first appointment that they are offered. Our employees can sign up for vaccine if they don't live in St. Louis County, in both the county where they live and the county where they work. And so that's super helpful. Our problem right now is we have the desire to get folks vaccinated, and we have worked through potential scenarios by which we could do larger amounts of vaccination, or the health department has mass vaccination plans. They're not getting enough vaccine week to week to implement those plans. So I was on a call with the state health department on Wednesday, and I was on a call this morning with our local counties and the health department. And right now the prediction is that critical mass of vaccine is likely to hit around the first week of April. So they'll continue to do as they're doing now through the signups. And they think that teachers likely will have larger mass vaccine opportunities by the time we get to the first week of April. And we'll keep you apprised as we know more.
Great. I think if there are any other questions, we can hear how reentry into buildings is going.
Great. So as you know, we reopened schools last Monday. I think that reopening was a qualified success. We've had some bumps and hiccups. I've been in all of the buildings multiple times. I will tell you that teachers were overjoyed to see kids, and kids were overjoyed to see teachers. So we had a lot of smiles and a lot of learning. We did have a few hiccups, and we continue to do after action review on each of the things that maybe didn't go as planned. There were actually not a whole lot of disruptions in terms of the things we planned. Planned went very smoothly. We had a few hiccups with our busing because we've contracted with drivers externally, and they weren't familiar with Maplewood streets and routes. And so we did have some delays in the first few days with busing, and Mike and his team worked to get that corrected in short order. Teachers are reporting, and we've all seen firsthand, kids are doing an amazing job following protocols and taking that very, very seriously. Teachers, I've checked in with the heads of both teachers unions and multiple teacher groups throughout the week. The reports I got were folks feel safe and that they're being taken care of. I think we're still having some growing pains in terms of how we manage kids on site while kids are learning synchronously at home, and making sure that we're responding to emails and texts and meeting needs of the kids at home. And so we're working on that and working on planning. The contact tracing team, as I told you in the prior report, with quarantining, got quite the workout over the weekend as we dealt with, certainly not our first contact tracing case, because we've been doing that throughout, but the first one that actually crossed into an entire classroom quarantine. That team, and Vince can speak more to that, but that team spent quite a lot of time together talking through what that meant. Talking through what was required versus what we thought was the best safety protocol in terms of the most restrictive, and we opted for the most restrictive for a variety of reasons. The subs are working well. We've had fill rate, and our permanent subs in the building have been able to help us in scenarios. When we've had today, we actually ended up sending a teacher home as a precautionary measure, which turned out to be something that we didn't need to do, but better safe than sorry. And our permanent subs were able to step right in. And so all of that is going exactly as we had planned. I don't know, I could talk probably forever about very specific things, but all in all, from where I'm sitting and where the task force is sitting, the plans that we've put in place are being implemented, and we've had very few unexpected difficulties. And in the moments when we've had them, we've been able to quickly assemble a team, talk through what went well, talk through what needs to be adjusted, and make those adjustments in short order. Vince, Chris, Mike, do you have anything you would like to add about reopening from your perspective?
Not really. I mean, I'd love to, if you have any questions, answer them. The one thing I would notice from the school nursing side, which I've been directly involved with over the first couple of weeks, so having that fourth nurse has been extremely helpful. Gives us a lot of coverage when we need it and extra support. The foot traffic in the nurse's office has been low. Not so surprised about that, but by giving first aid kits to the classrooms, the messaging has been clear. Hey, if it's something to be taken care of in the classroom, go ahead and grab a Band-Aid, et cetera. But also, I think because the students are there just 3 hours, that having a shorter day, I don't think their need to go to the nurse diminishes in terms of like the recess time, the lunch time, those kind of things. So the foot traffic has been slow, not slow. We're still busy, but we're able to manage it and focus on contact tracing and working with families, which is what we hoped for. So that's gone pretty well.
My favorite memory of the week, I talked to a kindergarten student and I asked them, how it was going. And I cannot be nearly as expressive of the child, but she said, "It's amazing. It's too short. Can I stay longer?" I said, "It is amazing. Thank you, but not right now."
Roxanne, I have a quick question.
Yes.
Have we identified any areas where we need additional supports? And that might not be the case right now, but I know with this being new to opening up the school, is there anything that we're finding that we've got gaps in?
Actually, yes. So our surprises have been in our buildings and grounds department. Only because we have enough staff to handle our needs, but we don't have redundancy in staff. So the busing, we knew that it would be more time to have the midday. It's taking a little more time than we anticipated, which has cut back on the cleaning. And then we factor in just normal absences from non-COVID related illness. We're finding ourselves a little short and finding some of the staff members had to work a lot more overtime than we would like. So Mike has worked on a plan. We have put out some calls to do some additional hiring, and then he's also working on a plan to let us use a temp agency for buildings and grounds support, which will help us quite a bit. So right now that is our need. The hiring that I've had you do the last few months to get us ready seems to be adequate in other areas. We're still watching. We added extra resources to our all virtual learning program. So we're watching that. And we've also added some TAs to help the asynchronous learning in the afternoon. So we're watching that. But right now, I think buildings and grounds would be the staffing area where we need the extra support, and we're working that plan. Thank you for asking that.
Roxana, can I ask you a question? I know you mentioned that last week we had a little bit of a busing problem, and that's possibly because of additional drivers. Are these, how many added drivers did we have to get to help out?
Chris or Mike, I think the answer is 2, but I don't want to speak out of turn.
Okay.
We hired a part-time driver, and how many first student drivers do we have currently?
5. We've got 5 contracted through first student.
Okay.
They're not running routes every route though, are they?
They're running the afternoon, the midday flip, just in support, because we have we have to have our drivers picking up while we have the others dropping off. So
Gotcha.
Okay. So that means we're actually running more buses in right now? Is that?
We are, yes.
Okay. All right. Are these drivers, you feel they're going to be long-term extra drivers that we have, or it's hard to say right now?
As long as we're in a tier 2, we're going to need that additional support.
Okay. Thank you.
Other than our wayward driver, we've had a experience with the first student team. They are one of the better companies that we've worked for. They're super considerate and have been very responsive when we've called and made additional requests. So they've been very flexible and amenable to all of our needs.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Other questions or concerns to raise here? Well, I hope it continues to go as smooth as possible, and appreciate everybody here and on the extended staff team for diligence and hard work and continued hard work through this. All right, we have a presentation by Dr. Dietrich, right?
Yes, Mike is here. He's been working really hard trying to think about how we might be able to continue to work on the building metaphor, which is so important for curriculum connections in light of COVID. And so he has brainstormed a number of options. Obviously, we're not traveling out of state with any kids for the long future, and we're not doing any short-term field study that would be unsafe. The reason he's presenting you tonight is this proposal, they are asking us to commit to a contract, which has a monetary implication. And so we want to involve you in the thinking of that before we would make any kind of commitment. So I'll let Mike talk the way through it, and then we'll come back to you for questions and conversation at the end of his presentation.
Well, I want to start just by saying thank you for the opportunity to have students on campus the last week and a half, and an opportunity to say that our students and our staff have really rose to the occasion, especially our students. They have just been absolutely fantastic. And I know that's not why I'm here tonight, but I would be able to say that our students and our staff have just really rose to the occasion, and I'm very proud of them. So the reason I'm here this evening is it's been over 350 days since our last expedition and almost 600 days since our last overnight expedition. And I don't really look at that as, oh my gosh, we haven't gone anywhere. I look at it as we've really lost a lot of opportunities to engage in the world around us, which is really integral to the mission statement of the middle school. You know, we pride ourselves in being inquiry-based, and field study is important. But what we have found through both virtual learning and even in just the 6 days or 7 days now of having students back on campus is we're missing that connection to our world and the direct application of the content that it's nearly impossible to replicate in the classroom. We have a really, really talented staff, but there are some things that you just can't do in a classroom that you can do when you get to the outside, the four walls of a classroom. And it's interesting as we talk about moving kids outside, because it's actually one of the first things that some schools did to get kids back on campus, right? They moved their classrooms outside. And in essence, that's what we're asking for in this is we want to get our kids outside, but away from school, off campus, and engage them in the open air, right? So seeking ways to teach safely during the pandemic, schools across the United States have embraced the idea of classes in the open air. And that was Amelia Nierenberg who said that in October. In an EdSurge newsletter, they just talked about how critical it is for students' intellectual, physical, and mental well-being to be able to engage in outdoor classrooms. So that's really what we're going to do is take our classroom and move that to the outdoors. So we're proposing a partnership with Big Muddy Adventures. They've been in business from 2002, leading these trips on the Missouri and Mississippi River. They have a spotless record, which is one of the big reasons why that's who I want to partner with, right? All their guides are trained in first aid, CPR, rescue, all the things that you would want from a reputable company to keep us safe, because I know that's our number one goal. We've trusted our kids with Big Muddy in the past. In fact, in 2012, my very first expedition with MRH Middle School, and I couldn't find the picture, but it was me in a canoe with Big Muddy Adventures in Fredbird. I actually went to the Riverlands and they're like, hey, we got one more spot. And I was like, okay, I'll go. And I turned around, I got to get in a canoe at Fredbird. So that was my very first expedition with MRH. And for me, that was pretty epic because I'm a lifelong Cardinals fan. But really what we're looking for is that opportunity to deliver our content in a real world, authentic setting. We want an opportunity to reinforce our cornerstones and provide students with connectivity to our planet. And then even going from an equity standpoint, I know I've said this to the board before, we hear a lot about the achievement gap, and I really see it as an opportunity gap, and providing all of these students to level the playing field and provide them an opportunity to springboard into learning or to review learning. So what will we be doing on this? These are pictures from Tremont, but there's a lot of things. We can't replicate everything from Tremont on this expedition, but I've worked with the teachers and said, hey, what can we replicate, right? And a lot of it is, we do a lot of reflective writing, personal narratives. We read historical narratives. Every evening we sit around a fire and we do storytelling, right? And, because that's where those speech skills come in. And then creative writing and journaling. So that's a lot of what we'll work on through our communication arts. And there's also a lot of overlap, right? Because it's not just siloed into content areas. But if we look at social studies, there's so much we can study around land use and economics, human migration, the difficulty of the westward expansion. It'll be really interesting. We'll go by the island where Abraham Lincoln was challenged to a duel by James Shield, because Abraham Lincoln's wife wrote a letter to the newsletter basically making fun of James Shields, and he challenged Lincoln to a duel. And so we're going to go right by that island. And the duel never took place. That's all I'm going to tell you. If you want to know more, that's my job as a teacher, to urge you to go out and read and find more information. So I'm going to allow you to do that. But also Lewis and Clark is a really heavy part of our curriculum, as we study. And we're going to talk about how if they didn't have York on the expedition with them, they probably would not have made it back. Okay? Actually, almost a guarantee they wouldn't have made it back alive. York saved them more times than none. In math, we talked about how do we get kids to ponder questions? So like, how much mud in the water of the muddy Mississippi, and how are they going to figure that out? Well, they're going to need to know what the turbidity of the water is. And then what are those percentages, and figure out how much water is in the Mississippi. And so a lot of learning that it's going to get the kids thinking critically, but also being in the moment to see what they're actually learning about and applying those mathematics. We can do time and distance. We can use collected data. So again, really, really exciting. That's an idea of clean water. And the other one is actually muddy Mississippi water. So we're excited about seeing that. In science, when I mentioned this to Mr. Hensky, I know most of you know Mr. Hensky. He's kind of our mad scientist on staff. And he was just giddy about the potential of this opportunity. But he instantly started saying, well, we can do this from Ocean Springs, and we can do this from Tremont, and just throwing ideas of studying the energy flow and cycles of energy and animal adaptation. And as always, I think it's important for MRH that we think about how do the arts pull over to this. So we may do some skits as we're on one of the islands, but also we've done a lot of work around Goldsworthy. And Goldsworthy uses nature to create art, and eventually that art gets taken back by nature. So it is a part of our Leave No Trace. So we would be excited about making sure that we have some art integration, because that's important for us at MRH. So what would a trip look like? So we would actually leave from Columbia Bottoms, which is about 40 minutes north of here. We would be taking approximately 20 to 25 students per trip. So we would have a very small group or cohort going. And they would either be leaving on Monday, we would have a group leaving, and that would be 8th grade. And then 7th grade would be leaving on Thursday mornings. And this is what one of their trips would look like. So day one, we're going to be on the Missouri River. A big part of our 7th and 8th grade curriculum is understanding our watershed, starting at Deer Creek and moving out into the Mississippi River and all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. So we'll be talking about that as we're on the river, and which would lead us to, at the end of day one, we would end up at an island, and we will camp on that island for 2 nights. What that island activities look like may change. Right now, we plan on handling most of that through MRH because right now where numbers are with COVID, we want to be able to keep a tight circle, not have any extra groups come in. Now, if numbers started to look better and we felt safer, and I would work with Roxana on this, we have opportunities to bring Missouri Department of Conservation to the island to visit with us, Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and they would come in and they could talk to us about animal adaptation. If not, MRH, we have the expertise to go out in the field to do this safely and make sure we're providing very good inquiry-based learning. It may be animal adaptation and the kids are fishing and then they catch that fish and we talk about, where did you catch that fish? Top of the water, bottom of the water, why is that? How is animals adapted? We can do that. And then day 3, we get in our canoes, and this is the part that really excites me just from kind of that epic standpoint. Now, this is not what we will be doing. We will be wearing masks. This is a pre-COVID trip from Muddy Waters, or I'm sorry, Big Muddy Adventures. But ending up at the Arch. And that's where parents would be able to pick up their kids, or if they're not able to pick up their kids, we will have some charter buses that can bring kids back to campus. But how epic for a 7th or 8th grader to be able to say they canoed Missouri, Mississippi, and ended up at the St. Louis Arch. I know one of the big concerns is being out on that big river. A large portion of this trip is actually done on a part of the river where there is no barge traffic. Army Corps of Engineers maintain a canal for the barges for traffic because of the navigation of large vessels on that particular stretch of the river. So a large portion of our trip will not even have barge traffic. So what does that look like for us? You've seen these slides before. It doesn't change our mindset. Even though we know the CDC says it's safer to be outside, we're still going to follow the same procedures that we would inside. So we're going to have consistent and proper mask wearing all day, every day. We're going to be sanitizing. We're going to be socially distancing 3 to 6 feet all day, every day. And we will be going as staff. We will be doing health checks both in the morning when students wake up and in the evening before they go to bed. We feel that's very important. You've seen this. We may need to take some students on the bus whose parents can't get them to Columbia Bottoms. We're prepared for that. It's already in our budget for that. And we would be following the same protocols that we would for regular transportation to school. We will be definitely talking to students about wearing masks and how that's the proper way. I've had a lot of conversations with Big Muddy about, hey, this is what we expect from your personnel. And I have been very impressed with their COVID protocols and how they're handling those. And I'll get into those a little bit more. And just to remind you, these are things that we shared with our students that when they're not in school, these are things we expect them to be doing. This provides us with a really good opportunity for us to reinforce these with them because we're going to be away from campus. So what do things look like with Big Muddy? Big Muddy will provide prepackaged meals. They're trained in doing that. When food is provided for them that is not prepackaged, it will be pre-plated. Their personnel will be wearing gloves. They will be wearing masks. And paddlers are required to sanitize hands, wear a mask, and socially distance when being served. Once they get their food, they're going to spread out. That's at the point where, to be honest with you, I don't even feel comfortable at 6 feet. It's going to be greater than that. It's going to be, hey, pick your personal area. A lot of times what we'll do is a kid takes a stick and they mark their personal area, and we make sure that they're far enough away from everybody. And we've done that on other expeditions as well. As I mentioned earlier, Big Muddy staff have been trained. Their guides come from a variety of backgrounds. They have extensive experience in the outdoors. They are trained in wilderness first aid and CPR. In addition, we'll have MRH staff who are on the trip, including me, who have been through wilderness first aid training, have been through CPR training. So we feel really good about just the levels of safety that we can provide for these students. So a lot of people look at, okay, we're going out on the Missouri and the Mississippi, and they've been on the Huzzah in a little canoe. We are not out there in little canoes. These are like the flagship, like cruisers of the Mississippi and Missouri. They're anywhere from 25 to 30 feet long, rather large. We can socially distance students 3.5 to 4 feet apart in those canoes. They will still have masks on. And we really feel that we can do that safely so that we can provide them with this opportunity for inquiry-based learning. This is what the Big Muddy 5-star tent accommodations look like. Every student will have their own tent. And as one group moves out, they will come in, they will sanitize all the tents for the next group to come in. So really nice that two things that play really well here is one, they're in open air. And then two, they will be sanitizing all of them. The students will bring their own sleeping pad and sleeping bags. If they don't have those, we do have some from a grant that we wrote a few years ago to provide, and we'll be washing those in between so that we can make sure kids are staying safe with their gear as well. And to end, I really feel that we can do this and we can do it safely. We're excited about it. We're ready for it. I am very, very confident in the protocols we have on campus. And I'm very confident that those same protocols can be done safely off campus. So I'd like to open it up. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer.
Principal Dietrich, how many MRH staff members would you anticipate would be going?
So that is open. It will not be the same demand on our staff as it would be if we were at Tremont or Ocean Springs. Okay. Part of this is having the guides from Big Muddy there because they're the experts on the river. So what I've committed to in my conversations with Roxana is that we will have an administrator on every trip. So we'll have 8 trips total. There will be an administrator on the trip. That'll be either myself or Mr. Flores. If it's up to me, I'll be on all 8. I'm okay with that. It's expeditionary learning is my passion, and I want to be the one there handling things. But I also know I have to provide an opportunity for Mr. Flores too, because he hasn't been on an overnight expedition. And then we'll have 2 to 3 MRH staff members each time on each trip. And then part of that will be judging which staff members go depends on who's going, right? On some trips, it may be 3 gen ed teachers, right? It may be, 2 gen ed teachers and a special school district teacher. It may be 1 gen ed teacher, 1 special school district teacher, and a special school district aide. We need to customize that based on the groupings that we have going.
And I might have missed, sorry.
Go ahead.
Real quick. And I might have missed this. When did you say you were thinking of starting these?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a really important detail, Randy. I'm sorry. These would be during the month of May. So we feel really good about, having some additional time for, our numbers to get even better. But again, I still feel like this is, if you go by research, this is actually safer than having our kids currently in the situation we're in. And I feel very confident and feel we're being very safe inside the school. But we have May 3rd through the 28th, I believe, is the schedule.
Okay, thank you.
And again, the reason we're here tonight is because the slots are filling up with other schools. And so we would need to engage in a contract soon if we think that we want this to happen.
That was my question. Dr. Dietrich, I guess when is the last date that we would need to do this, or is this a sense of urgency, like this has to be done ASAP?
Yeah, not to hurry you, but there is a sense of urgency in the fact that Big Muddy has put out their spring calendar and it's filling up, and they've actually extended the date for us already.
My concern is, I'm with you. I am hopeful that May looks so much better than it does right now, but we don't know. And so that's kind of where I am. I think that it's a brilliant plan, but I think everyone knows where I am when it comes with this virus. I'm just extremely cautious. And so my concern is it's February, it's the beginning of February, and I just have no idea what May looks like. If we had more, if we knew that we would have more vaccinations at that time, I think I would probably be more comfortable. But just not knowing that and it being the beginning of February, I'm not comfortable. But that's just me. So I just wanted to make sure you understood that, Dr. Dietrich. Like, I appreciate the detail and the planning that you put into it. I'm not trying to not show appreciation for that. It was very detailed. It's a very good plan. It's really outside forces. It's not you.
And Nick, I want you to know too that when I spoke with parents about this, I did call a few select parents to say, hey, what would I need to do to make you feel safe? I actually spoke with one of our launch parents who inquired of, even if they are at home in the current setting, would they be able to go on the expedition because they felt, a higher level of comfort being outside. And that's when, as a staff, we actually made the decision we could accommodate that, where if students who are in launch, we feel good about that, and we could bring them in so that they could be with their peers on this inquiry-based trip as well.
And I don't know that you said this, but what you've expressed to me is this is an opt-in. So this is not something that
yes.
students would have to do. This is something that we'd like to provide for the families that would like it.
Yeah, that's a good point, because when it's Tremont and Ocean Springs, we do have parents who say, well, I don't want them going out of state, and they've never been away from home. And I get on the phone and I push the buttons and I'm like, well, this kid needs to go. This kid needs to go. This is not something I'm going to do on this trip. This really needs to be an opt-in. Families have to feel comfortable with it. They have to feel safe with it. That being said, I will make myself available to any and all phone calls and Zooms to make sure as many families as we have that need to have those conversations and feel good about what we're doing. And they may ask a really good question on something that I can address and make the expedition better.
Right, thank you. And thank you, Roxana, for explaining that. I think you all know it takes me a little bit to think about things too. Like, I like to mull things over, and I know that this is an action item tonight. And I guess that's just my problem. Like, I understand. I just would need more time. Even though it is an opt-in program, I still would need more time. I think this is just pretty quick for me and not enough time for me to think over it, to make a decision that I'm comfortable with.
Mike, just quickly, so I'm understanding, our current 8th graders will have not had this kind of experience yet, correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
So our current freshman class who didn't get to go to Ocean Springs last year, at least they were able to experience that with Tremont in their 7th grade year. Our 8th grade group this year would be the group that didn't get to go to Tremont last year, experience this type of learning, and now again this year if we were not able to provide that opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
and
you.
Then just quickly, I want to say my level of appreciation for you reaching out to parents proactively, because I think that helps me get the confidence that, that I need in making this decision. And also the fact that having been, had 2 kids that went through expeditions, and I really think the whole opt-in or opt-out is a really important thing. And I appreciate that we're doing that. So.
Thank you.
I would agree with that as well. Are we talking like from a financial standpoint, like a deposit at this point in time, or are we talking about like
the reason we came is we do need to sign up, and we do it's half the total fee if conditions get really worse and we back out, we're obviously not going to go if conditions are bad, but we would lose half of that fee, which is a substantial amount. And so I wanted you all to be fully informed of what that would mean. If we wait, we don't have slots. And so it isn't really a possibility for our students. And we're working really hard to give those 8th graders something, because without this experience, they're going to lose that whole expeditionary experience. And we didn't want that. So I thank Mike, because he's sat through a number of meetings with me. He's taken the safety aspects super seriously, and I'm pleased with what he's come back, because I do believe he's accounted for all of the protocols we would be practicing here if we were on site.
So that was kind of the second part of my question. I think you kind of answered, was it's somewhat tied to where we are in the tier structure as well, even though it's an opt-in. Should we go forward with it, it's still tied to sort of the tiers function. And what we're saying is, if things deteriorate, we would just be out that deposit.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And I do also want to assure the board, just because we're asking for this expedition does not mean we're opening other field studies or field trips. We are not. We're only considering this one for 2 reasons. One, based on the work he's done, we can do this safely with the protocols we use on campus. And 2, that expeditionary experience for middle schoolers is a really big deal in terms of their learning. And we wouldn't want to have a class matriculate that didn't get any
Didn't get it at all.
that experience.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I was wondering, did Big Muddy give you a sense for the frequency with which adverse weather conditions play? And May's kind of a tough month sometimes.
Yeah.
What would our contingencies be if the weather is just unacceptably bad?
Yeah, so I did have that conversation with Matt from Big Muddy, and because they are the leading outfitter on these 2 rivers, they have a lot of partnerships. So if there was a week where instead of 20 kids, like let's say it did that the first week, we could potentially add a canoe from one of their partners, like 1 canoe over 4 weeks, which we would only be expanding that group from, basically 19, 20. I gave you the high end, 19, 20 students to potentially 25. So that's why when I said 20 to 25, I was really telling you what my max size group was.
And then you also did say to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you also said to me that if Big Muddy canceled due to weather, or if COVID numbers increased and they canceled because they weren't going to run, that we would carry our deposit over for a future trip in another year. Is that what you said? Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah, I mean, right. I think that's the other really good thing I enjoy about Big Muddy is just their willingness to partner in this. I can tell you that they do most of their business as far as schools is with private schools, and they're super, super excited about that avenue of working with a public school. And they're super excited about that. And because of that, they've been so flexible with us. But also, Wes, to talk about the weather and the safety, they are constantly monitoring not just the weather, but also the water levels. Right. And they base on, basically there's one area of the river where if the water's at a certain level, we don't even go through there. We pull off to the side, they throw them on a trailer, we walk 100 yards, we have lunch, we get back in the canoes, and we go on. Everything they do is around safety, which is why I chose Ocean Springs, which is why we go to Tremont, which is why I would choose Big Muddy.
So I guess the only final question I had is just how big is the deposit? What are we looking at? I don't know if I saw that in the presentation.
Yeah, so I'd have to do the math in my head, but each grade level is $17,500 for the trip. And that covers everything from canoes to guides to everything. And that would be times 2 because it would be 2 grade levels. But then we would get, Chris, I think you probably have the invoice in front, was it a 5% discount if we did book both grade levels? But we would lose half of that. That being said, obviously you're in a contract, but I also know the conversations I've had with Big Muddy, and that they're going to work with us. And, you know, oh, sorry. I think I'm here at school too late. Let me,
Jump up and down.
I can't. I have plexi in front of my desk.
Oh, of course.
You saw it. It's like reliving my college days of playing hockey because I feel like I'm in a penalty box.
Well, thank you, Michael. Those are the questions I had.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Any other clarifications at this point? Again, I know we are moving on this more quickly than we maybe typically would. And again, this isn't, you know, committing anybody's firstborn children to have to go on this, you know, canoe trip, but certainly giving them the option to do that, right? All right. Well, thanks for the presentation, Mike, and let you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. On communications forum, I think we have talked a couple of meetings about just the unusual conditions of this academic year and the opportunity it affords us to revisit this previous practice of communications forum. I will mostly turn it over to Roxana here, although I do think that one thing I noticed is I think the dates on here were listed incorrectly as April. We're talking actually about doing the communication forum this month still, right? So
That is correct.
So yeah, so just again, wanting to say that's part of why this is here tonight. There's a few things that we need to do between now and our next board meeting, and then the communications forum would be coming up later in February.
So what we wanted to talk with you all about tonight. So yes, communication forum. I'm not seeing a date, but yes, we are wanting to do that in February, which is a Monday. I think it's the 22nd, if that is the Monday. I believe it's Monday, the 22nd. We did take the policy, which I've attached by a link there, and you can see a markup. So we did take the policy to the CBTF this past month, and we asked them to look at that through the lens of the teaching staff and what they would want to see. We had quite a lengthy conversation about ComForum and the need for ComForum. And so there was a lot of questions about how is that like or different CBTF. I talked you through that somewhat. They suggested that ComForum meet at least once annually, ideally in the fall. They understood that the purpose of that forum would be an opportunity to dialogue with the board around school improvement issues, future visioning, or give the board an opportunity to ask questions about district goals and how they were being implemented, and we would structure that. The part that they were most interested in changing was the part at the bottom about CBTF. They would like to change that language so that it's clear that CBTF is meeting each year monthly as needed throughout the school year. And that they also suggested that we have some language in there to talk about the fact that CBTF is specifically convening for issues related to compensation and benefits. And they wanted some language about who should be part of CBTF. And so I've written some notes there so that you could see it. I also wanted to just have a dialogue with the board about, things that were important to you that might go into this policy. And then Katie and I talked, and I'll take all of the information from both groups and work with Cindy Ormsby and the MSBA policy folks to get a draft together to hopefully have ready to bring back to you at the regular February board meeting. But I thought we should start with a dialogue to see what thoughts and ideas and questions you might have.
Yeah, the one thing that I, again, trying to limit the communication between staff and board, I just think that there are channels for that, certainly. I would be maybe more in favor of saying that the comms forum will happen at least once every academic year, not necessarily once every semester. I think that is potentially one of the things, that got us into more short-term thinking as far as the topics that came up, because we were doing them more frequently. They felt more immediate as opposed to as part of our, kind of annual planning processes. And that would allow us to, again, refocus the comms forums on some more big picture and longer term kind of conversations.
That was the CBTF teacher feedback as well.
So I think historically, it's been a bit of a challenge for the board to sort of come up with topics on their own, sort of, independent of what the building representatives and the staff want to talk about. I mean, I think there's probably, lots of things we could go into. So I don't know how staggering that information would work. I mean, I think we obviously want to give you, or whoever's like organizing this, as much time to put the information together and synthesize it. But I feel like maybe it would be helpful for this group to hear. My sense is you'll hear back from topics from the staff probably more quickly or more readily, or you already have some ready to go, and kind of seeing how those play within our role within the communications forum, and our, how we could maybe add to those topics or something would be beneficial. Although I don't want to stifle any of my other colleagues who have already want to bring topics to the table, but I tended to always view these opportunities as more, them getting a chance to bring things to us as at the board level, and us, hear about our, thoughts and reactions to those kinds of things. But, I obviously want to be able to have more, communication across both groups as best as possible. But one of the reasons why it became stale in the past was I think we just kind of ended up recycling some of the same topics. I mean, obviously we have new things on our plates now that are certainly top of mind, but I don't know, more of a comment than a question, I guess, in that regard.
Well, thank you for raising that, because that was part two. My first question was, is there anything in policy you really want to see? My second comment around this issue was going to be that by the next board meeting, we will need to address what topics the board would like to bring to the table in that agenda. And so, if you all have things that you want to know about, equity issues, COVID response, things that traditionally have been on the fore of this board's work, then, you might start thinking about how we would phrase those questions for a dialogue, because you obviously will bring at least a few questions each time too that you want to hear responses for. But I think you're right, Francis, knowing what they care about and finding a merge, because this whole exercise, we have about an hour and a half to have some meaningful conversation. So we don't want to have too many topics to try to cover if we want to have dialogue.
Roxana, I think you bring up a good point. I don't think there's going to be any shortage of topics brought forward from the staff. So, but what I'm hearing you say is maybe we have a little bit more time the board can think about.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's helpful.
I didn't want to make you come up with something tonight. I'm just planting a seed that as you guys are thinking by the February board meeting, if we could have one or two what we think are meaty conversational topics that you really want to know about in terms of things we said we were going to do, or if you're thinking forward about what we might do, this is a great opportunity to hear from the staff.
Yeah, and I'll commit to sending an email to the board just to remind you about that. We can maybe collect an email and then actually kind of see what surfaces and agree to that at the board meeting later this month.
So to my colleagues who have been a part of this in the past, can you just give me a sense of what it is? And the reason why I ask is because to me, in my mind, the waters are getting muddy. You all have just ingrained in me, we have one employee. And so I definitely want to hear from our teachers, but I'm just confused on this committee that we're talking about right now. Like, what is the end all purpose of it? Our teachers, would they be able to come to us with complaints? I just don't understand. So can you tell me your experience to my colleagues? Sure. Maria, Francis, I like whoever has experienced this before.
Yeah, I mean, again, I have been part of a comms forum before, and you know, again, I think that in the years that I was part of it, things were a little bit more granular maybe than we imagined they could be. But you know, one of the questions I could imagine us asking is, you know, what have we changed during COVID that you would like to see us, you know, not revert back to, you know, old ways, and just, you know, being able to have a dialogue with staff around like around that, you know, what's worked for them, not making any promises, you know, we're not saying like, oh, okay, well, since, you know, there was, you know, the COVID FMLA, we're going to keep that forever, right? But being able to kind of hear some from on the ground experiences. I mean, I think we could also, you know, get into, it's my understanding, you know, that some of the more unique like incentives that we've, you know, created as part of the district's compensation programs, even the way that we staff some of the existing, or, you know, populate some of the existing committees that do work across the district, are ideas that have come forward from the staff and you know, teams that are working on the front lines.
So I said it this way, Nikki, to the teachers who kind of had the same questions. We've got a lot of different teacher groups that operate. So for building issues that are issues in the building, there's a building leadership team with teacher reps, and they work directly with their building principals. For district-wide teacher issues that are more, you said complaints, you know, that are things that need to be resolved either because they weren't resolved in the building or because they're truly district issues. We have monthly teacher leader meetings where teacher leadership and teacher representatives meet directly with me and the cabinet. Then we have CBTF, which is really around compensation, salary schedule, labor kinds of issues, about employee benefits and working conditions. So that's not ComForum either. ComForum was really designed as a way that the board and the teachers could co-vision and talk about kind of big topic issues of where the district would like to see themselves in the next 3 to 5 years, what goals we should be focusing on. And then if we've set goals through CSIP or other venues, a way for the board to check in with the teaching staff about how are we doing with these things? Are there things that we're not thinking about that should be on our radar when we think about equity, for example? Are there things, it's a way to vision. And so we don't necessarily try to solve specific problems through ComForum. What we're trying to do instead are raise the topics that we should be interested in and that we should be thinking about that maybe we're not. So it's a broader, more mission vision kind of conversation typically than those problem solving meetings that we do in the other forums, if that's helpful to think about.
Yeah, I would describe it as trying to find blind spots. Where are those places where what we envision are being impeded by things we aren't aware of, and an opportunity to discuss those issues.
And so you'll have administrators there, you'll have teaching representatives there, you'll all be there. It's just a way to get a good cross section of the district to engage in those conversations on a at least an annual basis.
And Nikki, just to add to it, I learn a lot in those kinds of opportunities. It did get a little granular, like Katie mentioned, and that's why we put a pause on it. But it is such an opportunity to learn different perspectives, which just informs us and makes us, more armed with information to make better decisions sometimes.
Yeah, I don't have a ton more to add. I think it was summarized really well, but to me, it's sort of like, we set policy, and these are some check-ins as to see how that policy really plays out in the everyday classroom buildings and, culture of our district. And, as long as, there's good alignment, I think pre-COVID, there was the feeling that, we were in pretty good sync and the policies were being carried out, and people felt like they had sort of developed that sort of culture and been put into place. And now we have a lot more things that, we have an equity resolution, we've got all the things with COVID. And, for me, it's just that where the rubber meets the road kind of, not a gotcha moment, not a complaint, not a air your grievances kind of moment. It's more of a like, how can we do better? Are our policies really clearly laid out so that how to sort of enact them within, your building, your classroom, what have you? And, good, frank, I think constructive conversation. And I think there's good guidelines and rules, and the way the topics are carefully formulated and what we're talking about today helps sort of, I think, steer the conversation to something more constructive. And if it's better served in CBTF, or it's better served in, that granular stuff, like we used to get calendar questions all the time, or we used to get like, PD questions, and there's ways that you can steer that question to something else. Whereas some of these other things that fall outside of that, I think ComForum's the right place for that conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I have a very clear understanding now of what this is.
It's a good question. It's a really good question, because we lost our way there for a while, and I don't think we knew why we were having that.
All right, so yeah, thinking on questions that you might want to hear from from a cross section of the MRH staff team on. And like I said, I will remind you with an email about that. We can collect some ideas and decide on our questions at the next board meeting. If you have any other thoughts on the policy, feel free to drop that to Roxana as well. We'll visit a updated policy at the February meeting as well. All right. Our last item here is my reminder to tell you that we have now a signed MOU with the MAP Center. Unfortunately, we do not have confirmed dates for our equity data. So we're trying to solidify that. Did have another good conversation with Cynthia before the MOU was finalized about these this meaning making meeting or two, and just wanted to affirm that, this is part of, the ongoing process with the MAP Center, that, we'll remember that they did they did some surveys in early 2020 with, a cross section of our stakeholders, had a really good, response from those folks. And that we are now in the space of trying to find some time to, not for them to tell us what our data says, but really, again, to go through a process, probably not unlike what sometimes the TLC, meetings do, is to actually, look at this data and to see what stands out to, again, to a broad cross section of folks who are engaged with the district. So I think, unfortunately, we don't have our dates set yet. So, but I do, talk to Roxana about the idea of both, asking our principals to help us identify some folks that we might consider being part of this conversation, and putting out a broad call for folks to self-nominate from, the community, whether it is, a community of staff members, of some of our older students, or, again, broader community members. Again, with the caveat that just because somebody self-nominates or is nominated by a principal doesn't mean that they will, automatically get in, because we'll have, a limited amount of people that we can, bring together even over Zoom, and that we want to make sure that we are looking to represent a broad array of perspectives and lived experiences across the district. So just affirming with you all that that is the plan once we have dates established. Again, I think we were hoping that that would at least kick off at our March work session, but I do not have that confirmed from the MAP Center yet. So I am hesitant to put out a call without the specifics. We'd be asking you to participate in these, 3 meetings sort of thing. So
we'll reach back out to her again tomorrow. It's on my list of things that we'll do.
But again, wanting to just kind of gut check that approach for populating the group of folks who would be working with the board. I think frankly, Cynthia wasn't super stingy with the number. I feel like she would be okay with us having maybe 50 people participate on this. Now that's a lot of people, and that Zoom, we can do like some breakouts and things like, but I felt a little bit better about that number, because I do feel like then that gives us the opportunity to bring in, not there's already 12 squares populated on my screen right here, so we can bring in some community members, parents, students, staff, and feel like we can have the opportunity to represent, more than just the kind of dubbed leaders of the district.
Katie, I know I asked this before. Would this be an opportunity to include Dr. Jameson?
Yes, definitely.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
And Dr. Jameson is aware and has already said that this is something that she's planning to, take personal time if needed, or is working into her schedule.
Oh, awesome! Thanks for sharing that.
All right. So more confirmation on dates there coming soon.
Just had a couple things I wanted to add too. If you're not aware, MRH has had the opportunity to co-sponsor the State of Black Education Symposium, which is happening today and tomorrow. And as part of that, there is actually a job fair on Saturday. So Ed is going to represent us at that flipped job fair. So it's really an opportunity. We put together a commercial for the district featuring the equity policy. And then folks that I have access to all of the applicants, and then Ed will be available for folks to ask us questions. So it isn't a type of job fair where we interview folks, they actually interview us. And so we're very excited about that. I know several of us participated in today's sessions before this board meeting, and will participate again tomorrow. So that's something that is currently happening. And then I also just wanted to remind you of the book that I sent you, Belonging Through a Culture of Dignity. I kind of apologize for the rambling first chapter summary I sent you. I was trying to like reflect and think out loud, which helps me process. I am currently on chapter 3. So as soon as I get a minute, I will send you notes on chapter 2 and try to keep you along as we work through the book. But I think it has some things to tell us in terms of culture and building community that will be very important in our work forward.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder on that, Roxana. I also finally got around to starting the book over the weekend, and appreciate that it does have some specific questions for reflection, and it was helpful to think about the specific examples that I'm aware of, of where the district's journey has been, and see some of the patterns that they talked about, show up, but also some of the things they said, oh, I think maybe we've actually worked around that, common trap or whatever. So that is helpful. Thank you for sharing your learning. And I know Benita is also working on the book as well. So we'll have that in common with her too.
Forgive me, y'all. This conversation in 2.05 actually reminds me of something I wanted to ask in 2.02, which was the school reentry update.
Mm-hmm.
Roxana, is there a way that we can also get updates on our students that are working through PLP?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, we're going to have an enrollment update at the board meeting in February. And, I think especially that'll be interesting to track changes in enrollment that are impact, folks who are in the tiers versus, fully virtual, and, some families that opted into homeschooling, at the midway point as well. So if there are other, questions that you would want answered, obviously Vince likes to make multiple appearances on the enrollment data. So if there are, I'm sure he'd be happy to come back, or we could dig into some things that come up during that conversation. But if there are questions around that, please.
No, not so much the enrollment. I'm really I know that our administrators and our teachers have been working hard to put more of MRH into the PLP program. And so I would when we get our school reentry updates for our children that are in the building, I'd also like to get updates for our children that are not in the building, that are on the PLP. How is that going? I know that there are like live classes that they're receiving now. I think that's their specials. Like, I'd like to know about that. Like, I don't want us to forget about them. I know you all don't. I know you, Roxana, and staff, you all don't. But I'm just saying, like, us, when we have these meetings, I want us to, essentially say their name, and we're speaking on what they're experiencing and as they go through this as well.
Thank you for saying that, Nikki, because you're right. We've put a lot of time and attention making sure that they're getting specials from MRH teachers once a week. We've hired additional teachers and teaching assistants to help to make sure that we're, particularly in the early grades, we're able to do live small group reading and do a lot of the things that we heard from feedback should be happening and people would like to have happen. So we have done a lot of those things, and we can certainly update you on them.
All right. Anything else? All right, well then we'll move to our one action item. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve the big money contract for the middle school as presented.
Second.
Francis, thank you, Wes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Brandy.
Second.
Thank you, Nikki. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, everybody. See ya.
Thank you.
soon.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good night.
Right.
Take
Bye.
care.
Take care. Thanks.